You're watching the MMA Oracles Podcast, and now, presenting your host, Jack Moon.
This is the MMA Oracles Podcast, and I am your host, Jack Moon, back for another episode here where I'm going to be breaking down UFC Mexico this week. Last week was UFC 298. My picks did pretty well for the night, and my parlay hit, so if you tailed on that and cashed out, you're welcome. Still a little bummed about Volk losing, so I'm not going to get too much into UFC 298. Instead, I'm just going to dive right into UFC Mexico. First fight on the night is Eric King Silva versus Muhammad Hilman Naimov. This fight makes zero sense. One fighter is an old bum who's basically about to be cut from the roster, and the other one is a fighter who's about to break into the top 15. So why match these two up? Who knows? In the red corner, we have Silva, who is 36 years old. He is 9-2 overall with 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's currently 0-1 in the UFC, with his best win being over a fighter who is only 3-0 on the Contender Series. And then he made his UFC debut and lost to TJ Brown by submission. In the blue corner, we have Naimov, who is 29 years old. He is 10-2 overall with 4 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's currently 2-0 in the UFC, with his best wins being over Landon Quinones, that came early in his career, and he has beaten Jamie Malarkey and Nathaniel Wood in the UFC. There was a bit of controversy in the win over Nathaniel Wood, but a win is a win, so still counts, and he is near the top of the division because of it. And he's now fighting a 36-year-old 0-1 UFC fighter. Because of that, it's pretty obvious who the favorite is. Naimov is minus 280, with Silva being plus 225. There's currently 1,475 Tapology votes on this fight, with 97% of those favoring Naimov. 67% of those are taking him to win by knockout. Of the 3% taking Silva, 32% have him winning by submission. This has been one of the easiest picks of the year so far. I would really be shocked if Silva wins. I think Naimov is just really going to steamroll him here. I think he's better everywhere. I don't see Silva having much success in this fight. I think Naimov is going to hurt him on the feet, and I think it's going to be a club and sub. I think he's going to fall him to the ground and lock something up. Both of Silva's losses have been by submission, so that is what I'm going with. Club and sub early for Muhammad Naimov. Official pick will be Muhammad Naimov by submission in the first round. Next up for UFC Mexico, we have a flyweight pairing between Victor El Magnifico Altamirano and Felipe Daytona dos Santos. In the red corner, we have Altamirano, who is 33 years old. He is 12-3 overall with 2 knockout wins, 4 submissions, and 6 decisions. He's not exactly the type of fighter the UFC wants for the flyweight division. He's not a finisher. He's not super exciting. I just don't think he fits that mold of what they've revamped this division to look like. He's currently 2-2 in the UFC. His best wins have come over Carlos Candelario on the Contender Series, and his 2 UFC wins, which were over Daniel Lacerda and Vinicius Salvador. On the other side, we have Dos Santos, who's 23 years old. He is 7-1 overall with 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. He is currently 0-1 in the UFC as he took a short notice fight to make his debut against top-ranked Manel Kape. And he showed some heart and potential in that fight. Even though he lost, I think his stock rose a lot. He had a good win over Hugo Paiva before coming to the UFC and signing for that late notice fight. And he's got a great team behind him at Shootbox Diego Lima. So I see a lot of potential in Dos Santos. I think he can go far. And apparently the odds makers do as well. Dos Santos is currently sitting at a minus 285 favorite, while Altamirano is sitting as a plus 230 underdog. There's currently 1,501 Tapology votes on this fight, with 87% of those favoring Dos Santos. 69% are taking him to win a decision. Of the 13% taking Altamirano, 71% are taking him to win a decision. I think the odds are pretty terrible for this fight. I actually expected Altamirano to be the favorite. He's from Mexico. He's fighting in Mexico City here. Crowd's on his side. Figured he would probably be the favorite, especially he's 2-2 in the UFC. The other guy's 0-1. So I wouldn't recommend really betting on this fight. Maybe if you feel like Altamirano can pull it off, maybe take him as an underdog here. But I'm leaning towards Dos Santos, so avoiding putting any money on this fight. I just think Dos Santos is he's younger, he's faster, he's got the better team, he's got more potential overall. I think he'll be able to edge these rounds out, even in Mexico City with the crowd cheering on Altamirano. So official pick will be Felipe Dos Santos by unanimous decision. Staying in the flyweight division here, the next fight of the night is Luis Lazy Boy Rodriguez versus Denis Psycho Bondar. Rodriguez is 24 years old. He's 15-2 overall with 7 knockouts, 4 submissions, 3 decisions, and 1 disqualification victory. I have not been impressed with him at all. I don't think he's very good. So far in his career, he's really beat a bunch of bums, and he lost to Jerome Rivera on the Contender Series. We saw how Jerome Rivera played out in the UFC. He was a fighter who couldn't cut it in the big leagues and has been removed from the roster. He's won 5 straight fights since that fight against Rivera with 2 decision victories, one of them being a split decision, a knockout over a fighter who was 6-5, and his latest victory was a TKO win due to an injury over a fighter who was 11-11 going into that fight. So not a great look for Rodriguez, in my opinion. On the other side, Bondar is 31 years old. He is 19-4 overall with 4 knockouts and 13 submissions. Obviously, he's a finisher. He's finished every single one of his pro wins. He's an exciting fighter to watch. I think the UFC brought him in as he fit the style that they were looking to have for the flyweight division. He's a guy that will put on entertaining fights. That's what they want in this division. And I thought he had a lot of potential coming in. He's been pretty much a total bust since. Complete disappointment, really. I was expecting a lot more from him, but he has looked pretty awful in the UFC. He's 0-2 currently. He got injured in his debut against Malcolm Gordon, lost a TKO. Finally was able to come back and ended up losing a technical decision against Carlos Hernandez. So I do think this is a good step down in competition for him, and we'll see how it plays out. Looks like the odd makers are of the same mindset. Bondar is currently sitting at a minus 220 favorite, with Rodriguez at a plus 100 underdog. Bondar's coming from the Ukraine to Mexico, and that worries me a bit for this fight. The travel, how early is he going to get there? How is he going to acclimate to the elevation? Am a little bit worried about that. But beyond that, I think he's shown a lot of potential in the past. And really, like I mentioned, nothing that Rodriguez has done has really ever impressed me. Don't think he's looked that good. He's still only 24, so he has plenty of time to improve. But yeah, I'm really looking kind of overlooking Rodriguez here. To me, I see this as a bust versus a bum type of fight, and I'll take the bust pretty much any day. A bum, I mean, he's a guy that really hasn't shown me anything, whereas at least the bust has, he's shown potential in the past. Maybe he can get some of that back here. So I do think Rodriguez, his style is also going to kind of play into Bondar's style. He is a guy that does go for finishes as well, and he's going to kind of push forward, and I think that will allow Bondar to start grappling with him. And on the mat, I think Bondar should be able to take over. Official pick will be Denis Bondar by submission in the first round. Up next on the card, we have a lightweight pairing between Claudio, Prince of Peru, Poyes, and Fariz Smile Killer Zion. In the red corner, we have Poyes, who is 27 years old. He is 12-3 overall with 2 knockouts, 7 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's currently 5-2 in the UFC. He is the TUF Latin America 3 finalist. His best wins have come over Felipe Silva, Jordan Levitt, Chris Gruetzemacher, Clay Guida, and his only losses have been to Martin Bravo and Dan Hooker. He is a submission specialist, a knee bar specialist, really. He's got multiple wins by knee bar. Very dangerous ground game. He can kind of pull those out of nowhere. So Ziam's going to have to be careful and constantly try to avoid going to the ground with him. Ziam is 26. He is 14-4 overall, 4 knockouts, 5 submissions, 5 decisions. He is currently 4-2 in the UFC with his best wins coming over Jamie Malarkey, Luigi Vendramini, Michael Figlak, Jai Herbert, and his losses have been against Don Madge and Terrence McKinney. He's a really well-rounded fighter. He is a precision fighter, is something I would describe him as. He picks his shots really well. He doesn't rush things. He really takes his time and fights smart. So he's also the bigger fighter here, and he also has a better team behind him. So he is currently the favorite at minus 225, with Poyes sitting at a plus 185 underdog. There's currently 1,434 Tapology picks on this fight. 68% of those are favoring Ziam, with 75% expecting him to win decision. Of the 32% taking Claudio, 72% are picking him to win by submission. What makes this fight interesting is that both fighters really do have the tools to beat each other. 3 out of 4 of Ziam's losses have been by submission, and 2 out of 3 of Poyes' losses have been by knockout. So Ziam is the better striker. He's going to want to keep it on the feet. Claudio's going to want to get it to the floor. That's going to be the tale of this fight. And Ziam is the bigger fighter. He's got the reach advantage, and he's got really solid takedown defense. He's defended 75% of his opponent's takedowns in the UFC so far. Like I mentioned earlier, Poyes has dangerous submissions. He's kind of got that Hail Mary submission where he can kind of Imanari roll for it. He can, just kind of dive at the legs in any moment for in any grappling exchange. So Ziam will have to be careful. Because of that, I don't really like the odds being so wide. I don't like Ziam at a minus 225 favorite, especially with his past submission defense. Most of his losses have been submissions, so don't like that. I'm still going to stick with him. His 75% takedown defense is a good look for him in this fight. Him being the bigger, stronger fighter is also a good look for him. I think he should be able to beat up Claudio on the feet and just sort of avoid the grappling submissions at all. He's got a great team behind him, so I think they'll have him well prepared to kind of just pick his shots and stay away from the grappling exchanges. So official pick will be Faris Ziam by unanimous decision. Up next, we have a flyweight pairing, and this is a really terrible fight, so I'm going to make it as quick as I can. Between Edgar Purochkali Chairez versus Daniel Miojo Lacerda. Chairez is 28 years old. He's 10-5 overall with 4 knockouts and 6 submissions. As you can tell by his 10-5 record, he's not very good, but he has finished all of his wins. He is currently 0-1 in the UFC, and he has the type of style that the UFC wants for the flyweight division. So a win here will likely save his place on the roster. Lacerda is 27. He is 11-5 overall, also a shitty record, with 5 knockouts and 6 submissions. Also a finisher, though. He is currently 0-4 in the UFC. How he's even still here, I don't know. If the last fight hadn't ended in a no contest between these two, we likely still wouldn't have him on the roster. He has actually a similar style to Chairez, as you can tell by the finishes there, but he's also just not very good. Chairez is currently sitting at a minus 380 favorite, with Lacerda at a plus 280 underdog. Do you think those odds are kind of steep? Both these guys kind of suck, so setting either one of them at a big favorite, I'm not a fan of. There's currently 1,477 Tapology votes on this fight, with 93% taking Chairez. Of those 93%, 53% are taking him to win by submission. Of the 7% taking Lacerda, 50% are taking him to win by knockout. Really, the loser of this fight should be cut from the roster. Honestly, I wouldn't mind just cutting both guys right now and avoiding watching this fight at all. Even though it should be pretty entertaining. In their first fight, Chairez kind of opened up. He was controlling the striking. He was striking from the center of the cage. He ended up getting taken down, which was a solid takedown from Lacerda. But Lacerda tried to land some ground and pound, and Chairez was able to get back up pretty quickly. He was also kind of attacking off of his back, so not a big moment for Lacerda there, but solid takedown at least. Once he got back to his feet, Chairez ended up locking up a standing guillotine, and the referee just almost immediately stopped the fight. He didn't check Lacerda's arm to see if he was still conscious. He just kind of jumped in really fast, which was bizarre, and Lacerda immediately protested as he was not unconscious at all. Really, I kind of see this fight playing out the same way. Chairez is able to kind of control the striking. He is going to be the one attacking more, taking a little bit more risks because he can. Lacerda being 0-4 in the UFC, he can't really afford to lose this fight. He knows that. I think it's going to make him a little overly cautious, and I think we're going to see him get caught in another submission. I think he's going to get caught in the first round again, too. I think Chairez is going to go on the attack, especially it being here in Mexico. He's going to want to put on a performance, prove that that first fight wasn't a fluke and that he actually belongs here. So give me Edgar Chairez by first round submission for the official pick. Staying in the flyweight division, we have a matchup here between Jesus Aguilar and Matus Bocal Mendonca. Aguilar is 27. He is 9-2 overall with 1 knockout, 6 submissions, and 2 decisions. He is currently 1-1 in the UFC, with his best wins coming over Edgar Chairez, Erison Ferreira on the Contender Series, and his lone UFC win, the knockout over Shannon Ross. Did show some powerful boxing with that knockout win over Ross, but his striking is still improving. That was his only finish with the strikes. He does have some decent wrestling and grappling. He's got a good amount of submission wins. He's really a compact and powerful fighter. On the other side, Mendonca is 25. He is 10-2 overall with 3 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 3 decisions. He is currently 0-2 in the UFC. He does have a very good decision win before he came to the Contender Series over Pedro Nobre, and his 48-second knockout win on Contender that earned him a UFC contract was impressive as well. He is a more well-rounded fighter. He's dangerous everywhere, and he needs a win badly here, so I expect him to come in with a kind of a fire under him in this fight. He is the minus 150 favorite, with Aguilar sitting at a plus 125 underdog. It's currently 1,395 Tapology votes on this fight. 72% of those are favoring Aguilar, with 49% taking him to win by knockout. Of the 28% taking Mendonca, 48% are expecting him to win by decision. I am a little worried about the elevation for Mendonca, but not enough to keep me away from picking him entirely. The fans on Tapology are favoring Aguilar pretty heavily here, and I can see why. Mendonca's 0-2 in the UFC, whereas Aguilar is coming off a big knockout win. But looking at their skill sets and careers as a whole, I do think Mendonca is the better fighter. He's definitely the more well-rounded fighter. He's also the better striker, and he has a 9.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. So definitely the bigger fighter. That being said, the longer it goes, the more it could start to favor Aguilar, but I do think Mendonca will be able to at least rack up enough points to win the early rounds. So give me Matus Mendonca by unanimous decision for the official pick. Headlining the preliminary card for UFC Mexico will be a bantamweight matchup between Christian Problema Quinones and Raoni Barcelos. Quinones is 27 years old. He is 18-4 overall with 10 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 5 decision victories. He's currently 1-1 in the UFC with his best wins coming over Vinicius Oliveira, Wang Zhao, and Khalid Taha. He is a very dangerous striker. He's a brawler with heavy hands, and he's going to be looking for the knockout in this fight. He is going against Barcelos, who is 36 years old. He is 17-5 overall with 8 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 7 decision victories. He is currently 6-4 in the UFC, with his best wins coming over Bobby Moffett, Kurt Holobaugh, Chris Gutierrez, Saeed Nurmagomedov, and Khalid Taha. He is a solid striker as well, probably the more technical fighter, probably just the better fighter overall, skill-wise. But he is old at 36, and he's 1-4 over his last 5, so he desperately needs a win here. He actually is the favorite. Barcelos is minus 175, with Quinones coming in at plus 145. There's currently 1,394 Tapology votes on this fight, with 58% favoring Barcelos. 75% of those are taking him to win decision. Of the 42% taking Quinones, 58% of those are taking him to win a decision. I'm actually a little bit surprised to see Barcelos as the favorite. Looking at their records, I get it. But I definitely like Quinones as an underdog here. Quinones definitely could lose this fight. Like I mentioned, he's technically not as good. And he has been finished by knockout in 2 of his 4 losses. So the path to victory is there for Barcelos. But I mean, if this fight happened in 2020, it would be a no-brainer for Raoni Barcelos. I mean, there's no way I wouldn't be picking him. But it's not 2020. It's 4 years later. He's 36 years old, and he's 1-4 in his last 5, and he looks like a shell of his former self. He's really hit a decline lately, and I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up getting knocked out. I think Quinones is going to go after him. They're in Mexico. He's in his home country. He's going to want to put on a show. The elevation could also get to Barcelos, and I think these two are going to strike it out on the feet. And Barcelos, being the older, not as durable anymore fighter, I think it's going to start to favor Quinones. Quinones hasn't been extremely durable himself, so there is a bit of a worry there. It's definitely not a lock, but I will definitely take the shot on the underdog in this fight. Give me Christian Quinones to win by knockout in the second round. Kicking off the main card, we head to the lightweight division for a pretty great matchup here between Manuel El Loco Torres and Chris the Problem Duncan. In the red corner representing Mexico, we do have Torres, who is 28 years old. He is 14-2 overall with 7 knockouts, 6 submissions, and 1 decision. He's currently 2-0 in the UFC with his best wins coming over Frank Camacho and Nicholas Mota. He's a very exciting fighter to watch, obviously a finisher. He's finished all but 1 of his pro wins there. And he's dangerous everywhere. 7 knockouts, 6 submissions. He's a really good prospect, great representative for Mexico here. And I think he's going to come out wanting to put on a show. And Duncan is definitely the guy to oblige him there. In that blue corner, Duncan is 30 years old. He is 11-1 overall with 7 knockouts, 1 submission, and 3 decisions. He is also currently 2-0 in the UFC. His best wins have come over Charlie Campbell, who he beat on the Contender Series to earn his UFC contract. And then he has beaten Omar Morales and Yanal Ashmouz in the UFC. He is a good striker, but he's also a good wrestler, and he's definitely shown some improvement recently in his last couple fights to fight a little bit reckless, to avoid. He was kind of getting hurt early in fights and being a little bit reckless, and I think he's kind of reeled that in a little bit and fine tuned his game over his last couple fights. Been impressed with him. Definitely a solid prospect in his own right. And because of that, you can see that reflected in the odds. Torres is currently sitting at minus 115, and Duncan is sitting at minus 105. Both guys near even, both minus money here. Um, Close fight, should be a great one here. There's currently 1,442 Tapology votes on this fight. 81% of those are favoring Torres, with 80% of those taking him to win by knockout. Of the 19% taking Duncan, 44% of those are by decision. Duncan is going to strike with Torres in this fight. Make no mistake about it. And I think that's going to lead to his own downfall. I think if he does wrestle, he is going to have a better chance at victory, kind of mix things up, keep Torres guessing. But Torres hasn't been taken down in the UFC. He's got 100% takedown defense rate right now. He's shown good takedown defense. He has only fought twice in the UFC, but solid takedown defense that we've seen from him so far in his career. Duncan definitely could get him down, I think, but like I said, I think Duncan's going to oblige him, kind of want to put on that show, want to go to war with him, and I think it's going to lead to his own downfall. Duncan's been knocked out before. We saw him lose on his first appearance on the Contender Series, and he got rocked early in the first round against Charlie Campbell, and it looked like we were almost going to see a repeat of him kind of coming up short again on the Contender Series before he kind of found his bearings and put Charlie Campbell away instead. Torres is a really fast starter, and I think he's going to be able to capitalize on that kind of perceived weakness from Duncan, that he is a little bit of a slow starter, having gotten knocked out before in the first round, having gotten rocked before in the first round. I think Torres is going to come after him, and I think he'll get it. Go ahead and give me, for the official pick, Manuel Torres by knockout in the first round. Next up on the main card, I don't know why this is on the main card. It gives us a good bathroom break, I guess. Yasmin Jauregui versus Sam Hughes. Jauregui is 24 years old. She is 10-1 overall with 7 knockouts, 3 decisions. She's currently 2-1 in the UFC, with her best wins coming over Yasmin Lucindo and Estela Nunes. She's a good prospect for the division. She's definitely looking to represent Mexico here and get back in the win column, so I expect her to come into this fight fired up, and the crowd will definitely be on her side, so I guess that's something for this fight. But she's facing Sam Hughes, who is 31 years old and is 8-5 overall. God-awful record. She has 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 3 decisions under her belt. She's currently 3-4 in the UFC, with her best wins coming over Estela Nunes, Elise Reed, and Jacqueline Amarin. She's really not good, and if you can't beat her, you might not belong in the UFC. Jauregui is minus 470 as a favorite in this fight, with Hughes sitting at plus 350. There's currently 1,480 Tapology votes on this fight, with 94% of those favoring Yasmin Jauregui. 75% of those are taking her to win a decision. Of the 6% taking Hughes, 81% of those are taking her to win a decision. I mean, let's keep this simple. Jauregui has the upside. She's already the better fighter, really. She's got a better record. I guess Hughes has the better wins, and I guess this is a test for her. Hughes is kind of tough, but I would be pretty shocked if Hughes wins this fight. I just don't see Hughes' style working against Jauregui. I mean, she's the better striker. Hughes kind of likes to rush in and kind of, I don't know, she's not very good anywhere, to be honest. And I just don't, like I said, I don't see her style working in this fight at all. I think in Mexico City, this is kind of a spotlight fight to get Yasmin back on track. So give me Yasmin Jauregui by unanimous decision as the official pick. Now we're getting into some better fights here on this card. We move over to the bantamweight division for a matchup between Raul El Nino Problema Rosas Jr. versus Pretty Ricky Tercios. Rosas Jr. is 8-1 overall. He's only 19 years old. He's got 2 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 1 decision. He fought on the Contender Series at 17 years old. He's currently 2-1 in the UFC, and his best wins have been over Mendo Gutierrez, which is who he beat on Contender, and Terrence Mitchell. He also beat Jay Perrin in the UFC, but it's not a great win. I do see him as overrated still. Do see him as overhyped still. Obviously, a lot of people are saying that about him after his lone loss, but he has since rebounded with that win over Terrence Mitchell. But Terrence Mitchell sucks, really. I mean, let's be honest. Guy just beats trash cans. He's not beating anyone good. Really doesn't belong in the UFC. Got knocked out by a grappler, Brawl Roses. So really, he still hasn't beaten anyone. But he's still only 19 years old. So there's a ton of potential here. His grappling is pretty high level. And his striking is improving. So we'll have to see how he looks in this fight. He can kind of being so young, he can make leaps and bounds in his progression. And we could be seeing a new version of Raul Rosas Jr. going into this fight. He's taking on Ricky Tercios, who's 30. He is 12-3 overall with 3 knockouts, 1 submission, and 8 decision victories. He is currently 2-1 in the UFC as well. He is the TUF 29 winner. His best wins in his career have been over Steve Garcia, Dan Argueta on The Ultimate Fighter, Ludwig Shalinian also on The Ultimate Fighter, Brady Heastan in the TUF 29 finale, and Kevin Natividad for his second UFC win. Tercios is actually a really good fighter. He's well-rounded. He's not really great anywhere, but he's definitely good everywhere, and he can compete everywhere. So the only thing I really worry about him is he doesn't control fights as much as he really should. He kind of lets fights be closer than they need to be, but he's still improving as well, and he's got a great team behind him at Team Alpha Male. So I'm excited to see him back in here. He hasn't fought in over a year, so there is potential for a little bit of ring rust as well. Going into this fight, Rosas Jr. is the minus 260 favorite, with Ricky Tercio sitting at a plus 210 underdog. It's currently 1,575 Tapology votes on this fight. 87% of those are favoring Rosas Jr., with 54% of those taking him to win by submission. Of the 13% taking Tercios, 75% are taking him to win by decision. I'm actually really loving Ricky Tercios as this big of an underdog in this fight. Like I said, Raul Rosas is still overrated, still unproven, still overhyped, and still really only beaten guys who don't belong in the UFC, who are all pretty bad fighters. Nobody on the level of Ricky Tercios. Rosas is a quick starter. There is that chance that Tercios is suffering from some ring rust, haven't fought in a while. He's going to be going into Mexico fighting in that elevation. So Rosas starting quick. He could overwhelm Ricky Tercios early, but I think if he doesn't, it's going to be bad news for him. Rosas Jr. has shown cardio issues in the past. He's a fighter that he hasn't really learned to settle down in fights yet. He kind of just rushes. He wants to get the finish, and he doesn't let things materialize. He'll just try and force the issue. So going against a more experienced guy like Tercios, who has beaten much better competition, I love Ricky Tercios as the underdog here. I'm going to say that again. Tercios is a guy who kind of gets better as the fight goes along. The elevation throws a question mark on that as well as the ring rust, but um, going off his past fights is really all that I can do here. So Tercios, he does get better as the fights go along. I do worry about him kind of letting things be closer than they need to be. I think he probably will drop the first round. Rosas, like I said, starts quick, so I think he's going to kind of try and put it on him. But if Ricky Tercios can survive, I see him taking over second and third, winning those rounds, kind of winning the striking exchanges, defending the grappling, fighting his fight, and coming out with the decision victory. Great spot for Ricky Tercios as an underdog here. Give me him for the official pick, Ricky Tercios by unanimous decision. This is another great fight here on this card between two young prospects who I really like both fighters. It is Daniel Golden Boy Zellhuber taking on Francisco Prado. Zellhuber is 24 years old. He is 14-1 overall with 7 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 4 decisions. He's currently 2-1 in the UFC, and his best wins have come over Lucas Almeida, Lando Venata, and Christos Giagos. He is only 24 years old. He's a really great prospect, like I said. He's got a great team behind him. He's got a great skill set, a great frame for the division at 6'1". His Golden Boy nickname is really appropriate. He looks like he's got the look. He's got all the skills. He looks like the kind of ideal prospect for Mexico, for that lightweight division that they're going to want, the guy that they can really build up here. He's got a base in Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he's dangerous everywhere and is someone to really watch out for. On the other side, a lot of what I said about Zellhuber can apply as well. Prado is only 21 years old. He's 12-1 overall with 6 knockouts and 6 submissions. Guy's a finisher. He is super exciting to watch. He's currently 1-1 in the UFC. His best wins have been over Jose Barrios Vargas and Otman Zaitar. He's only 21 years old. Like I said, another super great prospect. He's really beaten a lot of trash fighters, though, and really needs to prove himself. This is a big opportunity for him. If he can beat Zellhuber, I think that's a huge win for him and kind of sends a signal that he is kind of coming into his own as a prospect and ready to keep moving up. He's very fun to watch. I'm definitely a fan of Prado's. Great style there. His base style says street fighting, so this is a guy that, he doesn't mind a brawl. He doesn't mind a scrap on the ground either. He is spending time training with the Goat Shed. I think that's a great team for his style as well. And I'm super excited for this fight. Going into it, Zellhuber is a minus 260 favorite, while Prado's sitting at a plus 210 underdog. It's currently 1,464 Tapology votes on the fight. 81% of those are favoring Zellhuber. 79% are taking him to win a decision. Of the 19% taking Prado, 61% of those are taking him to win by knockout. If there is a finish in this fight, I do think it will favor Prado, most likely. This guy doesn't win decisions. He's looking to finish fights, so I think Zellhuber is going to be a little more cautious, and I think if there is a finish, we'll see Prado pulling off that upset. Like I mentioned, though, a lot of the competition he's beaten really not that good. Even his best win over Otman Zaitar. Otman, also a guy that's not very proven, had some issues with steroids, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't think I can take Prado over a guy like Zellhuber at this point. It's kind of one of those fights where I can see it happening, but until I see it happening, I can't pick it to happen. Um, Prado's good, but until I see him actually beat some better competition, I do struggle to pick him against someone like Zellhuber, who is a little more proven. Um, should be a fun fight, but Zellhuber is the more technical striker. He's also bigger, has a little bit of a reach advantage. I think he's going to be able to control the fight, probably survive an early storm, and take over the later it goes. At elevation, Prado's style could cause him to gas out as well. So look for Zellhuber to kind of turn it on in the later rounds and really put a stamp on this fight. Give me Daniel Zellhuber by unanimous decision as the official pick. For the co-main event of the evening, we move over to the featherweight division for a rematch in a fight that I really thought should be the main event between Yair El Pantera Rodriguez taking on Brian T. City Ortega. Rodriguez is 31 years old. He is 18-4 overall with 7 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 6 decisions. He is 10-3 in the UFC currently. He is the Tough Latin America 1 winner, and his best wins have come over Dan Hooker, Andre Fili, Alex Caceres, BJ Penn, Chan Sung Jung, Jeremy Stevens, Brian Ortega, and Josh Emmett. That win over Brian Ortega was sort of a fluke injury win. But Rodriguez is a super dangerous and creative striker. He's been showing improvements in his overall game lately as well, especially in the grappling department and clinch department. I think he's definitely shown improvements. His footwork is really good as well. But I still see him as a little bit overrated. People kind of get sold on the flashy striking, but I see a little bit of some holes in the game there for him, and think he's a little overrated still. In the blue corner, we have Ortega, who's 33. He is 15-3 overall with 3 knockouts, 7 submissions, and 5 decisions. He is currently 7-3 in the UFC, with his best wins coming over Thiago Tavares, Diego Brandao, Clay Guida, Hanato Moicano, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, and Chan Sung Jung. He is an extremely dangerous grappler, probably the best in the division, probably some of the best in the UFC at all entirely, and his striking has improved greatly as well. His last win was over Chan Sung Jung, where he just kind of beat the brakes off him on the feet. So he is rounding out his game, showing improvements as well. But injuries have been sort of a big issue for him. I think it's caused a little bit of inactivity in his career. And I believe he's had about 4 surgeries since that injury that ended their last matchup here. So we're going to have to see how he looks coming back. Because of that, Rodriguez is a minus 165 favorite going into this fight, and Ortega is sitting at a plus 135 underdog. It's currently 1,661 Tapology votes on this fight. 86% of those are favoring Rodriguez. Of those 80%, 60% are taking him to win by knockout. Of the 14% taking Ortega, 67% of those are expecting him to win by submission. Fans don't seem to think this one's going to decision. It's either going to be the striker scoring the knockout or the grappler scoring the submission. I think that's what makes this such a great matchup is both guys are super talented and both guys are going to be hunting for that finish. So definitely don't want to miss this one. This is the fight I'm most excited for on the night. Definitely more than the main event as well. Like I mentioned, Ortega showed greatly improved striking in his fight against the Korean Zombie. Really beat the brakes off him. He almost submitted Alexander Volkanovski right after that. He had his shot at the title again. Had Volkanovski deep in 2 of his best submissions, and somehow Volkanovski got out. It was pretty insane. And then he fought Yair right after that, and I thought he was going to crush Yair. And he was actually doing well in that first fight and gained top control before he got injured. Early on in the fight, Rodriguez was using his footwork. He was landing good kicks from the outside, good jabs as well. Really at striking range, he was kind of piecing Ortega up. But he did look to throw some bigger hooks and ended up getting countered. Um, Ortega landed a couple good shots of his own, opened up a cut on Yair. Ortega was also able to get a body lock and kind of control Yair against the fence. The fans didn't like it. They kind of started to boo, but I do think that is something he can utilize more in this fight. It's been a weakness of Yair, the clinch game, throughout his career. So I do think that is something Ortega can exploit in this fight. Right after that, he also landed a takedown. And he was in top control. He just kind of got caught in an armbar. But it looked like he was slipping out of that armbar. It wasn't in deep. And right as he slipped out, his shoulder popped out of the socket. And that ended that fight. But I do think from that fight, I think Ortega kind of gained some valuable experience. Yair being this kind of creative, super fast striker, already having been in there with him and feeling that speed and range and power from him is, I think, a huge advantage, really, because it's with Yair, his best attributes are the unknown abilities that he has, the kind of creative striking, the things he's going to throw at you that you won't see coming, and Ortega has already kind of gotten a taste of that, so he does know to expect it a little more. Ortega was also able to kind of walk through some of Yair's shots. Ortega's super durable, so he's kind of able to walk through some of those shots and keep marching forward to land his own and start the grappling. So um, I love him as an underdog here. He was actually in their first pairing. He was a minus 175 favorite. So coming into this, I know he's coming off the injuries. I know he's coming off the layoff as well, but I think that's also going to give him kind of something to prove in this fight. It being in Mexico, Yair being favored, Yair probably going to have the crowd on his side there as well. Um, Ortega also sort of went through a public breakup with fellow UFC fighter Tracy Cortez. He just needs a win here bad. So I expect Ortega to come in here with a fire under him, take it to Yair, walk through some of his shots, land his own, get Yair to the ground, and lock up a submission. So give me, for the official pick, Brian Ortega to pull off the upset and score a submission in the second round. It's time for the main event for UFC Mexico between Brandon, the Assassin Baby Moreno, taking on Brandon Raw Dog Royval. I've mentioned some stupid nicknames in the past on here. Um, I think maybe we'll throw up a poll whose nickname's dumber here, the Assassin Baby or Raw Dog. I actually think Raw Dog's kind of funny. The Assassin Baby, I don't know if you've watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There was a part where they were participating in an underground fight club, and to kind of throw off their opponent, the name that they gave their fighter was Clown Baby, and that's what I always think of when I hear the Assassin Baby. It's just Clown Baby. So um, I think that one's definitely worse. Uh, that being said, in the red corner, we have Moreno, who is 30 years old. He is 21-7 and 2 overall with 5 knockouts, 11 submissions, and 5 decisions. He is the former UFC flyweight champion. He was a contestant on The Ultimate Fighter 24, and he is 9-4-2 in the UFC currently. His best wins in his career have been over Louis Smolka, Dustin Ortiz, Kai Kara France twice, Hussier Formiga, Brandon Royval, Davison Figueiredo twice. He has great cardio. He's super durable. Like how Davison Figueiredo wasn't able to finish this guy in one of their fights was insane. He's lightning quick. He's got great combinations on the feet. Good wrestling as well. Obviously, dangerous submissions as well, with 11 submissions on his record. And he can really break fighters with his pace as well. So he can really do it all. Brandon Moreno's a really great fighter. He does have some holes in his game. I think that kind of people tend to overlook because of all the things he's doing so well that he does, there is a couple holes there. That's why we've seen him lose the title. That's why we've seen him lose a couple fights, why we saw him get cut from the UFC previously. Great fighter. I'm not taking anything away from him, but there is those holes there that can be exploited. And looking to do so will be Brandon Royval, who is 31 years old. He is 15-7 overall, 4 knockouts, 9 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's currently 5-3 in the UFC. His best wins have been over Tim Elliott, Kai Kara France, Rogerio Bontorin, and Matt Schnell, and Matthias Nicolau. This guy's a finisher. He'll take risks to get finished as well. He throws flying knees, spin kicks, kind of crazy stuff. Really unorthodox things that you won't see coming. He hits really hard for the division as well, and he's just constantly attacking this guy. He sets a high pace as well, so should be a great fight. Also a rematch, like I mentioned. They have fought before. Brandon Moreno got that win. So going into the rematch, Brandon Moreno is the favorite at -250, with Royval sitting at +205. It's currently 1,632 Tapology votes on this card, or on this fight, rather. 93% of those are favoring Moreno, with 61% taking him to win by decision. Of the 7% taking Royval, 44% are taking him to win a decision. In the first fight, both fighters really did have their moments. Royval definitely landed some good low kicks, landed a couple shots. Had that glancing flying knee attack. Was going for a leg lock. Definitely was attacking. Definitely had his moments, but it always seemed like Moreno was just staying a step ahead of him. He would land good counters. He would control the grappling. It just seemed like Moreno was a bit of a step ahead, even though Royval was working so hard and attacking so much. He just couldn't catch up to Moreno. And really, Royval's own aggression is what led to him losing that fight. His constant attack, he started going. They got into a bit of a weird grappling position, and he started going to attack a leg. Moreno started landing some ground and pound on him, and the way his body twisted, he ended up getting injured, and the fight was stopped because of it, and it gave Moreno the TKO win. And that was all in the first round, so expect another high pace here. The elevation could come into play, and I think that would probably hurt Royval more than it'll hurt Moreno. I don't think we've seen really Moreno get tired. Moreno also, I think, kind of paces himself a little bit better. Royval is a bit reckless with his attack. We've definitely seen him reel that in lately. He showed that in his title fight as well. But I think it's hard for Royval because him being so aggressive and taking those risks and throwing the unorthodox strikes, the flying knees, and just constantly on the attack is kind of what got him to the dance. So to reel that in, you're also slightly taking away some of his best attributes. He's going to have to kind of find a balance there, and it's going to be hard to do so against a guy like Moreno. We're seeing Royval come off his loss in the title bid. Moreno as well. But Moreno's kind of been there before, done that. I think Royval is more at a bit of a crossroads here where he needs to find that balance in his own game so that he can have success. And Moreno's not the guy to do that against. He's not really going to give him a chance to find anything. He's going to set that pace on him, kind of force him to be aggressive, but stay ahead of him and stay within himself as well. So expect Moreno to just be a step ahead. the whole fight. I don't think he'll finish Royval. I think Royval has learned some lessons, has improved, and is going to fight a little more measured. So he will make it to the final bell, but I do think Moreno will stay a step ahead. So for the official pick, give me Brandon Moreno by unanimous decision. And that's a wrap for this episode of the MMA Oracles podcast. I have been your host, Jack Moon. I do apologize. This one's coming out a little bit late again here. The 3-day weekend threw me off, but I would appreciate it if you could like, share, subscribe, and follow. I thank you so much for listening. You can find me at the MMA Oracles on Instagram, Twitter, X, YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. Also, you can find me at themmaoracles.wordpress.com. That is my official site where I post all of my breakdowns for the fights, as well as my rankings for every UFC division. I rank the entire division for every UFC division. So definitely go and check that out as well. Let's go over some of my locks for this card. I do have Muhammad Naimov. I don't see him losing to Eric Silva. Yasmin Harigi. She should beat Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes is not a very good fighter. She's 8-5 overall. Daniel Zellhuber. I like Francisco Prado a lot. I think he's a great prospect, but I don't think he's ready to be facing a guy like Zellhuber, especially in Mexico City. And then Brandon Moreno. I don't see him losing Mexico City either. Royval's just not where he needs to be to win that fight, I don't believe. So those are my 4 locks. As for my parlay for this card, maybe throw all 4 of those locks into a parlay. You'll be getting some plus odds. All the favorites on this card are really, I think, overly favored. Some of them are pretty close matchups, and the odds don't reflect that in some of them. So a lot of these fighters are pretty low end fighters. Not some of the ones I mentioned there as my locks, but some of these other ones like Edgar Shirez. I was looking at him, but he's such heavily favored, and he's a fighter who's 0-1 in the UFC. I know he's fighting a guy who's 0-4, but they both suck, so anything could happen. A lot of terrible odds for this card. I do like some of the underdogs for this card, though. I have Brian Ortega, Ricky Tercios, and Christian Quinones. I'm picking all of them to pull off upsets. You could probably find some good prop bets on them as well. Brian Ortega by submission, Tercios by decision, Quinones by knockout or decision. I think that's probably the smart money play on this fight, kind of dog or pass on this one. Best fights of the night: Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Don't miss that one. I think that's a super close fight. Both guys are going to be going in there to slug it out. I think that's going to be a fun one. Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado, 2 super good young prospects. Think that should be a great fight. And then what I believe should be the main event, Yair versus Brian Ortega. I think that is a fantastic fight. I was disappointed how the first one ended, and I think we're going to get a more clear resolution to this one. So don't miss out on that one either. I am going with Ortega, but he hasn't won a fight in over 3 years. In fact, the last time he won a fight, the current champion of that division, Ilia Topuria, was only 1-0 at the time. So Ortega needs that win. I think that's going to put a fire under him. I think he pulls off and gets the submission. So, yeah, that is all I got for this one. Thank you so much for listening. I am signing out. Appreciate it.